Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, June 14th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will reach a high of 89.7 degrees Fahrenheit with a low of 63.4 degrees. It looks like a warm day, so be sure to stay hydrated and seek shade during the peak heat hours. Coming up on Alex's News, we will dive into what to expect from the No Kings protests happening across the United States. We will also explore the details behind California's new state budget and why it's being described as relying on hope and internal borrowing to balance its books. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. We begin our morning with a look at what's expected to be a monumental day of protests across the United States. Today, June 14, 2025, cities nationwide are bracing for massive anti-Donald Trump demonstrations. These protests are known as the No Kings movement. They are strategically timed for a day that already holds much significance. For more on this unfolding story, let's go to our reporter, Ethan, who has been following the details. Ethan, tell us what's happening today.
Thanks, Grace. You're right, today is shaping up to be a momentous one. These No Kings protests are scheduled to unfold nationwide. They are quite literally happening as we speak. They are organized by a group called the 50,501 Movement. This name represents their goal of 50 states, 50 protests, and one unified movement. This timing isn't accidental. Today is President Trump's 79th birthday. It's also Flag Day, and the U.S. Army is holding its 250th anniversary celebration in Washington, D.C., complete with a large and costly military parade. According to reporting from ABC News, President Trump has reportedly increased the cost and scale of this parade. This means it is a birthday celebration that is less than festive for the president, when viewed from the perspective of the protesters.
So it's not just a protest against the president, but specifically timed to counter these events. What are the main issues fueling the No Kings demonstrations?
Grace is at the heart of the No Kings movement. This movement includes groups like Indivisible. Hunter Dunn serves as its 50,501's national press coordinator. Organizers describe the movement as a potent rejection of President Trump's authoritarian actions. It also opposes his billionaire-first politics and the militarization of democracy. As The Guardian has reported, they are very clear on their website, stating, quote, "The corruption has gone too far. No thrones, no crowns, no kings," unquote. Their core grievances include Trump's defiance of the courts, his mass deportations, what they see as attacks on civil rights, and the slashing of public services. This builds on protests that have been ongoing since his inauguration, particularly concerning immigration and federal workforce cuts.
And was there a specific incident that really lit the fuse for this widespread mobilization?
Absolutely, Grace. A major immediate trigger, according to ABC News and Click Orlando, was Trump's recent deployment of National Guard troops and U.S. Marine Corps troops to Los Angeles. This deployment followed federal immigration enforcement raids. It led to violence, curfews, and accusations of alarming abuse of power from Democratic governors. Ezra Levine, co-founder of Indivisible, observed hundreds of new protest events and hundreds of thousands of registrations since that Los Angeles crackdown, as uncovered by The Guardian. It really served as a rallying cry, illustrating what organizers fear most.
That's a significant escalation. So how widespread are these protests expected to be today? Are we talking about a few major cities or something far larger?
We are talking about something far larger, Grace. The No Kings demonstrations cover a very wide area. Rallies are planned for nearly 2,000 locations. These events will take place across all 50 states and commonwealths. This isn't just major cities. It extends to small towns as well, as reported by ABC News, The Guardian, and Click Orlando. While a flagship event is scheduled in Philadelphia, it is quite notable that no Kings events will take place in Washington, D.C. This decision was strategic. The Guardian explains why. They wanted to avoid giving Trump an excuse to crack down on counter-protesters. It also aimed to prevent the idea that protesters were against the military. Instead, they aimed to make Trump look as small and weak as he is by protesting everywhere else. One specific march is even planned to converge on Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, according to ABC News and Click Orlando. Organizers anticipate millions of people will participate. They call it the largest single-day mobilization since Trump returned to office. They intend to assert that, quote, the flag doesn't belong to President Trump. It belongs to us, unquote, as ABC News and Click Orlando mention.
Millions of people is a staggering number. What precautions are organizers taking to ensure these protests remain peaceful, especially with such high tensions?
Organizers are putting a strong emphasis on nonviolent action, Grace. ABC News, Click Orlando, and their own No Kings Information all report similar instructions. They have told participants to de-escalate confrontations. They also strictly prohibit weapons at any events. They have significantly expanded pre-protest trainings. One Know Your Rights call was led by the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU. It attracted over 18,000 participants. These sessions specifically address concerns about potential violence, outside agitators, and the safety of legal immigrants or DACA recipients, as reported by The Guardian. They're really trying to keep a lid on things and ensure this is a peaceful demonstration of dissent.
That's a wise move, given the volatile political climate. How are state and city officials across the country preparing for these anticipated crowds?
State and city officials are mobilizing, Grace, and their responses largely depend on their political leanings. According to ABC News and Click Orlando, Republican governors are deploying National Guard troops. Their purpose is to assist law enforcement. These governors include Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, the governor of Texas, and Mike Kehoe of Missouri. Nebraska also issued an emergency proclamation. This proclamation activated the National Guard as a precautionary measure. These governors have warned of zero tolerance for violence, destruction, or traffic disruption. They are vowing arrests for lawbreakers. Conversely, Democratic governors, such as Washington's Bob Ferguson, Arizona's Katie Hobbs, and Pennsylvania's Josh Shapiro, have urged peaceful protests. Philadelphia's District Attorney Larry Krasner, a Democrat, has also warned both potential lawbreakers and immigration agents against exceeding their authority, invoking Martin Luther King Jr. In California, state troopers are on tactical alert. All days off have been canceled for officers. It appears everyone is bracing for a truly king-sized day of action.
It certainly sounds like it. And finally, Ethan, how has President Trump himself reacted to these planned demonstrations and the fact that they coincide with his birthday and this large parade?
Well, Grace, President Trump has publicly weighed in, and his remarks have been quite forceful. He has threatened protesters. He stated they would be met with very big force. He also claimed that those who protest the military parade hate our country. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, later attempted to soften his remarks. Interestingly, according to The Guardian, Trump himself claimed, quote, "I don't feel like a king," unquote. The military parade itself, which is a focal point of some of the protest timing, is estimated to cost anywhere between $25 million and $45 million, and is expected to attract up to 200,000 people, according to ABC News and Click Orlando. It seems like this political chess game is about to get very interesting.
Indeed. Ethan, thank you for that comprehensive look at what promises to be a very eventful day. We appreciate your reporting.
My pleasure, Grace.
We'll keep an eye on developments throughout the day. Up next, we have another breaking story for you, so stay with us. Welcome back. For our second story this morning, we are turning to the Golden State, where California lawmakers have just approved a truly, quote, budget passed on hope, quote, spending plan. To help us unpack what this means for the state's finances and its residents, we go to our reporter, Chloe.
That is right, Grace. Late yesterday, according to reporting from capradio.org, familydocs.org, and courthousenews.com, California lawmakers greenlit a $325 billion budget for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year. It passed with significant majorities in both the Assembly and Senate, largely along party lines. This plan aims to bridge a substantial $12 billion deficit, but it is being widely called a, quote, budget passed on hope, quote, because of its heavy reliance on internal borrowing and very optimistic revenue projections.
A, quote, budget passed on hope, quote. Chloe, that certainly sounds like quite the gamble. Can you elaborate on what exactly makes this budget so hopeful and how they are planning to bridge that $12 billion gap?
It is definitely a high-stakes bet, Grace. The, quote, hope, quote, really stems from lawmakers banking on a, quote, miracle, quote, of unexpected growth, similar to past windfalls from capital gains taxes. But this optimism faces a real blind spot. According to capradio.org and courthousenews.com, Los Angeles County's tax revenue is delayed until October because of the January wildfires. That means a significant chunk of expected revenue is currently unaccounted for. Adding to that, the Legislative Analyst's Office, or LAO, has warned that while recent revenues are up due to a strong stock market, it is not a guaranteed trend, and they project substantial operating deficits for years to come. To bridge the gap, they are combining about $3.5 billion in cuts with nearly $7.8 billion in internal borrowing from various state funds and another $1 billion in delayed payments. They also are pulling $7.1 billion from the state's primary reserve account, the Rainy Day Fund.
So they are borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, or, in this case, borrowing from state funds to bridge the deficit. This budget sounds like it is really walking a fiscal tightrope, especially given Governor Newsom's initial proposals for some pretty severe cuts. How did the legislature's approved budget differ from what the governor initially wanted?
Indeed, Grace, it was quite the tug of war. Governor Newsom had proposed what many called, quote, draconian, quote, cuts to social services and higher education, but the legislature largely pushed back. For example, in Medi-Cal, the state's health care program for low-income residents, Newsom wanted a freeze on new enrollments for undocumented immigrants and a $100 monthly premium for some. The legislature rejected the $100 premium outright, opting for a reduced $30 premium for some undocumented recipients, and while there is still a freeze on new enrollment for undocumented adults, it is set to begin in 2026. They also rejected his proposal to reinstate an asset test quote for Medi-Cal, which would have made it harder for some low-income individuals to qualify based on what they own, not just their income. When it comes to higher education, Newsom wanted a 3% funding cut for the UC and CSU systems. The legislature restored that funding but deferred the payments, essentially creating an internal loan that the universities will need to navigate.
That is a significant divergence from the governor's plans. Given the reliance on internal borrowing, Chloe, can you detail some of the specific funds being tapped and the potential long-term risks of this strategy? Because I imagine there is always a catch when you are borrowing from yourself.
Absolutely, Grace. There are indeed long-term implications. The nearly $7.8 billion in internal borrowing primarily targets healthcare, higher education, and other special funds. For instance, according to ca.gov and familydocs.org, there is a $3.4 billion loan from the Medi-Cal Provider Interim Payment Fund and a $500 million in Proposition 56 supplemental payments for dental and women's health are being eliminated. They are also borrowing from funds like the AIDS Drug Assistance Program Rebate Fund, the Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund, and shifting $1.5 billion from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to support CAL FIRE. The risks are substantial. The elimination of Proposition 56 payments could reduce the number of Medi-Cal providers, hitting low-income individuals hardest. Deferred payments to universities create financial uncertainty, potentially forcing hiring freezes or cuts to student services. And repeatedly tapping special funds, Grace undermines their original purpose, like diverting environmental funds from their intended long-term goals. These loans must also eventually be repaid, often with interest, creating future liabilities for the state.
It sounds like they are creating a fiscal debt trap that could catch them in the future. With so much at stake, Chloe, what has been the general reaction to this budget from various stakeholders, like credit rating agencies, university officials, and advocacy groups?
Reactions are definitely mixed, Grace. Credit rating agencies like Fitch Ratings have maintained a stable outlook, but stress the need for future actions. Moody's Investors Service, however, holds a, quote, negative, quote, outlook for California, suggesting a more guarded view. University officials from UC and CSU have expressed alarm, with UC President Michael Drake voicing concerns that funding reductions could impact student enrollment and research. Healthcare advocates are among the most vocal critics. According to CMADocs.org, the California Medical Association condemned the diversion of voter-approved funds from Medi-Cal, calling it a disregard for voter will. Immigrant advocacy groups also criticized the Medi-Cal enrollment freeze, arguing the budget is being balanced on the backs of the state's most vulnerable. The Legislative Analyst's Office described it as a, quote, tale of two budgets, quote, noting uneven distribution of cuts, and political opposition, particularly from Republicans, has been very strong, with Senate Minority Leader Brian W. Jones stating the budget fails to help families with the cost of living and, quote, keeps pouring taxpayer dollars into handouts for illegal immigrants, quote, according to capradio.org.
Fascinating, Chloe. It sounds like a lot of political maneuvering and a lot of fiscal juggling. How does California's approach to this budget, particularly its reliance on internal borrowing, compare historically, and to how other large states have handled similar challenges?
It is a common, though often risky, tactic for states to balance their budgets during shortfalls, as all but one U.S. state operate under balanced budget requirements, according to taxfoundation.org. This involves the general fund borrowing from, quote, special funds, quote, designated for specific purposes, or pushing off payments into the next fiscal year. For context, during the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year, California faced a much larger $54.3 billion deficit, and part of their solution included $9.3 billion in special fund borrowing and transfers. So it is a familiar playbook. Compared to other large states, New York has also heavily relied on budget maneuvers, including a notable $1.7 billion Medicaid payment deferral from fiscal year 2019 to 2020. Texas also uses its rainy day fund and defers payments, but available information does not suggest the same scale of wide-ranging internal borrowing from special funds as California. Florida, on the other hand, primarily used federal relief funds and its budget stabilization fund during recent challenges, without relying as explicitly on large-scale internal borrowing from many special funds. So California's approach is certainly a distinctive strategy within the landscape of large states. The governor now has 16 days, until June 30th, to sign this budget into law.
Thank you, Chloe, for that insightful deep dive into California's budget. It is certainly a delicate balancing act, and we will be watching closely to see how this, quote, budget passed on hope, quote, plays out for the state's future.
You are welcome, Grace.
And that was Chloe with the latest on California's budget situation. Here are some other headlines. A storm of controversy is brewing in Washington, D.C., and it's not just the weather. The U.S. Army is set to mark its 250th anniversary with a massive military parade on Saturday, June 14, 2025. However, the date also happens to be President Donald Trump's 79th birthday, leading many to dub the event Trump's Military Parade. The celebration, estimated to cost between $25 and $45 million, will feature thousands of soldiers, around 150 vehicles including tanks, and over 50 aircraft along Constitution Avenue. While the day is planned to include festivals and fireworks on the National Mall, opponents are planning their own fireworks with a series of No Kings protests nationwide, decrying the event as a self-aggrandizing spectacle. And speaking of storms, forecasters say thunderstorms could literally rain on this parade, potentially delaying or canceling the festivities. Across the pond, a more somber note will be struck during a royal celebration. King Charles III will lead a moment of silence during his annual Trooping the Color birthday parade to honor victims of the recent Air India tragedy. The king, along with Prince William and other senior royals in military uniform, will also wear black armbands. The move is a mark of respect for the 241 people on board and 29 on the ground who tragically lost their lives when a flight from Ahmedabad to London crashed. In a remarkable turn, there was one survivor. The solemn tribute, signaled by the last post, will pause the traditional pomp and pageantry, a gesture Queen Elizabeth II previously made in 2017 for the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire. Back in the States, law enforcement in California is creating a picture of a person's life that isn't pretty. It's been revealed that police departments, including the LAPD and sheriffs in Orange, Riverside, and San Diego counties, have been illegally sharing license plate data with federal immigration agencies like ICE. The practice violates a decade-old state law, SB 34, meant to protect privacy. Records show this data, captured by automated readers, was shared over 100 times in the last month alone, despite prior warnings from the state's attorney general. Civil liberties groups argue this creates a dangerous data pipeline, undermining California's sanctuary state policies and putting immigrant communities at risk. That's not the only data controversy creating friction. Governor Gavin Newsom is blasting the Trump administration for what he calls a legally dubious abuse of power. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reportedly shared the personal health data of millions of immigrant Medicaid enrollees with the Department of Homeland Security. The data, including names, addresses, and Social Security numbers, was allegedly provided to aid in deportations. The Trump administration defends the move as legal, but Newsom and other state officials warn it will instill fear in immigrant communities, making them hesitant to seek vital medical care. This is all part of a larger political firestorm, ignited by the Trump administration's aggressive immigration overhaul. A push for 3,000 deportations a day, a new travel ban, and attempts to end birthright citizenship have been met with a wall of legal challenges. Courts have blocked several key initiatives, while states like California and New York are actively resisting. While the hardline stance plays well with the president's base, polls show the public is sharply divided. Meanwhile, experts question the feasibility of a mass deportation effort, estimating a staggering price tag of over $315 billion and a major blow to the U.S. economy. And that's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.